Well, how's it going, everybody? It's me, demonized Smurf girl, the Jehovah's Witnesses. So I want to talk about the occult, a little bit, and some Freemasonry, stuff like that, But, I want to remind people, to anyone who's a legitimate former Jehovah's Witness, like legitimate, that you'll know what I'm talking about. Like, especially if you were a kid raised a Jehovah's Witness. The one thing, like as a kid, like for a girl, and even with boys too, but really for girls, of being raised, it wasn't just me, with me being demonized Smurf girl. Yeah, it was more so, but everybody else surrounding me too was that way as well. Especially like, growing up in the late 70s and through, I was born 73, but growing up through the 70s and into the 80s for what happened with the demonized Smurf, of with the occult and Watchtower. They say, oh, like in the magazines, oh no, the occult, that's wrong. That's wrong. Like to these people, I can tell who's really been a Jehovah's Witness and who hasn't, who's got the real knowledge of what it's like to actually be a Jehovah's Witness and who hasn't, because, we lived it. And when they say, oh no, yeah, you shouldn't be doing that, that's wrong, that's the first thing they're going to end up doing. That's the first thing of when they say, like, oh, you better not watch porn and masturbate, then they're the biggest porn addicts. They'll say, oh, pornography, that's wrong. Like Lloyd, when they talk about how pornography is wrong with the Jehovah's Witnesses, does that mean they don't watch pornography like a bunch of, porn hogs? That, oh no, witnesses, they never listen to porn or watch porn because it says in the magazines that that's wrong, and then they wouldn't do it. No, they're the number one ones that do it. And that, when it says in the magazines that you shouldn't, jerk off, they're the biggest jerk offs on the face of the planet. And they'll jerk off to their own magazines, It's like, oh, it's a pretty girl, jerking off to the Live Forever book girl, Right, and, to look in the magazine and say, well, no, Watchtower say, so, they don't do that. Ball. Ball. We know that when it says in the magazine they don't do it, that's the number one thing that they do. When they're saying, oh, no, don't jerk off, don't, don't be this or that, don't be doing the occult, that they're going to be the ones doing the occult more than anyone. Don't, whatever you do, don't be Freemasonry. And then, Freemasonry's wrong. Well, then, they're going to all be secretly into Freemasonry. They're going to be like, ooh, because I know and they also say that, like child abuse is wrong. That beating your kid with a wooden spoon, everything they say they don't do, they do. And they do like a fiend. Like a fiend. Like growing up as a Jehovah's Witness, like not just that I was demonized Smurf girl, but how that happened is, I was no different than anybody else per se. It was, mine was way off the hook because I'm from a real gangster family, with a bunch of killers and crazy people. Junkyard Jehovah's Witnesses of, Hanson Salvage Yard of Millbank, South Dakota, these junkyard Jehovah's Witnesses. And so Grandpa Seaver Hanson, my stepdad's father, but he's Grandpa. He would buy stuff at auction sales all the time. All these auction sale boxes full of stuff. Just and with every the funniest thing is that in every single auction sale box, they sell things by the box at auction sales. This box is full of junk. In every auction sale box, there's gonna be something Ouija board, tarot card, or Freemasonry. In every single box, there's gonna be something occult weird in an auction sale box. And so, I'd be helping them dig through it and sort it, and Grandma would sell stuff at the, she had a 24/7 yard sale at the junkyard. Yeah, so we're yard sale people. Why people say be careful when you buy at a yard sale is because they were warning you about grandmas. And so we'd be sorting through stuff, and Grandpa collected Freemasonry stuff. Anything Freemasonry, no matter what it was. Shriner, just whatever. Odd fella, anything. And so I would help him sort it. And I would confuse sometimes Watchtower stuff, like before I could recognize, I'd come across something. No, and I'd be like, it's an old Watchtower. And put it in the Watchtower pile. Okay. Is this, no, and I get it confused because of the symbols, just look for something symbols, of that's what I collect, he'd be collecting something, or antique, and then he'd get mad because I'd mix it in by accident, just looking at, the symbols and stuff. And so he'd be, God, that's just that, why, he wasn't a witness. So he, Grandma was, and so I'd be like, oh, that's just Watchtower garbage, your dad will probably want that, so it would be like, okay. So I remember one time, I took these old Watchtowers home, the old like black and white ones, and I'm taking them with the one that looked like a tarot card, and with the lighthouse and the lightning and the water, so I bring them in, and there was like studies in the scriptures. There was all this different stuff, of the rainbow collection, of just, all these really, the time is at hand, of all these weird books of Watchtowers. And I put them on the table. There was I just was stacking them on, piling them on the table, and I was looking through them. And my stepdad, Arden Hansen, walks in the door. And I would sneak tarot cards and stuff and hide them in my room because I would want to look at them. Because they told me it was wrong, so of course that would be the first thing I want to look at. I want to look at it. What is it? I want to know. That's the way, like going for a sleepover. For being a Jehovah's Witness sleepover. You been for a sleepover ever? Are you like human beings being raised Jehovah's Witnesses? Like, for a little girl Jehovah's Witness sleepover, the first thing, maybe it was just me, but they, if I was demonized Smurf girl, but the first thing that anybody was like, oh, what we should do? Let's have a seance. Every Jehovah's Witness sleepover involves a seance. It does. Some kind of, pretending to do some crystal ball of, of what you, like, I kid you not, of whatever you're not supposed to do, you as a witness kid will do it. And do it behind your parents' back. Secretly watching Friday the 13th, watching Poltergeist, as you get, As a teenager, it was a witness. If you didn't sneak and watch Poltergeist or Friday the 13th or Sneak MTV, then you were not raised a witness. I don't know what kind of planet you're from. What kind of, of sneaking and looking and doing and, hiding it under your bed. So anyway, I put all of this old Watchtower literature from these auction sale boxes on the table because I brought them home, thinking that my stepdad would be all excited to see this old Watchtower literature because it was super cool and it was creepy. It was creepy. And, the winged sun disk and pyramids and, and he comes in the door like he had never seen it before. And he glances, because he would always just, how your witness dad just storms in the room and hardly looks and just instantly makes a judgment, just bang, of just, what are you doing? Instantly jumping to a conclusion before he even knows what's going on. I had gotten caught with like some weirdo books, because I like old books. I was into old books as a little kid, and I still am. Of any kind of weird book, I like to look at it. Some antique weird book, I like to, I think it's cool. So he saw these old books, and he's like, he just glanced, it doesn't even nothing. He goes, I don't want these old weirdo, demonized books of this. What is this? Some kind of tarot card, Ouija board, some kind of, Freemasonry crap from Grandpa, I want this garbage. I want this garbage out of the house. I want the garbage, Garbage in the house. Stupid Ouija tarot card. What is this garbage? What's this garbage? Yeah, garbage. Uncle Tony. And I'm like, it's old Watchtower literature that, we got at the auction sale. No, not. Not. You're late. It's like, says it Watchtower Bible Tract Society. I don't know, it was all cool and old. I thought you'd want it. No, I don't want any garbage in there. Stupid Freemasonry somewhere. Remember that, Arden Hanson? This is in the house at Millbank, the green one. Let me see that, Well, they don't do that anymore, that's not the winged sun, that's a coincidence. That's a coincidence. Don't be stupid. Why shouldn't they do that? It's a coincidence. And my stupid fool stepfather, there's no bigger stupid fool on the planet. And that stupid fool says that those symbols and everything are not, and that's just a coincidence, and to ignore it. And when he says it as a stupid fool, if anybody else says it as a stupid fool, you're just repeating Arden Hanson, and that would be a, wrong thing to do. Right? Yeah. And like as something, because when he just immediately glanced at it as a glance, he thought it was just a bunch of giant pagan mound of pagan books. Yeah, you're right. You're right. But let's just say that there was a book written by just some guy, just a nobody guy. And he's got like all this pyramid charts, these weird charts with a pyramid and a winged sun disk and some kind of cross and crown deal of, and these guys and Knights Templars like on horses and, of that it was just some guy. And you look at it, it's just some guy. You'd be like, what do you think this guy's all about? Just look at what do you think, it's just some guy. What do you think this guy's into? Oh yeah, he's probably all into the occult. He's probably all Freemasonry, some kind of Egypt, Ra, some kind of sun god, pyramid, masonry, occult thing. If you didn't know. Or let's say that Albert Pike put all of those symbols, and it was by Albert Pike, and he did it. And it was Albert Pike writing those words. Like the author means a lot. That like, instead of it Charles Taze Russell, saying, like, let's not change a single thing. We're not going to change a single thing of that literature. Not a single thing. Of the symbols, the word, nothing. We're not going to change nothing about it. But instead of Charles Taze Russell, it was Albert Pike. And Albert Pike is the one saying and doing all of this. It'll be like, oh, you know, that, no, it was, you know, that what if Charles Taze Russell was a ghostwriter? You know, that Albert Pike is like, oh no, you know, people know who I am. They know what I'm all about. So I'll just have some other guy do it, right? Like if we just change that, no, all these things are written instead, not by Charles Taze Russell. They were actually written by Albert Pike. And that this is all of Albert Pike's literature. And that outcome is what Albert Pike wanted. That would make more sense. That would make more sense. Because that's really that's what's been going on. Of like, you know, Albert Pike had his stuff. And then it's like, oh no, you know, like if I was going to do something. And I am like, well, everybody knows about me. Like with the witnesses. Like let's just say, for example, then instead of saying that that I'm the one writing Watchtower, I'm like, no, it's Mark Sanderson. You know, Mark Sanderson's the one saying those things. Or it's, you know, Uncle Tony, or it's, you know, it's those boys on the governing body. But in reality, it's demonized Smurf Girl. You know, it would take on, you know, the author, the real author, like, or that, no, I'm the one that did all that. Yeah, I'm demonized Smurf Girl. Because I am. I'm responsible from like 1982 onward for all of that. Of all the Ouija board, tarot card, of all their, you know, like I can't believe a group of people doesn't know how Ouija board, tarot card, crazy those witnesses are. Demonized Smurf, Ouija board, tarot card, yard sale, obsessed, porno, masturbation, Freemasonry, of anything that they shouldn't do, they're obsessed with. Because some of these supposed apostates have never been a Jehovah's Witness. And they take what's in those magazines as that if the magazine says that, no, it says in the magazines they don't do occult. Well, it also says that that they shouldn't be addicted to pornography. And are they? So if they say that they shouldn't do pornography and they're addicted to it, when they say that they shouldn't do the occult, they're going to be addicted to it. When they say that they shouldn't jerk off, they're going to be addicted to it. That they shouldn't do Freemasonry, that whatever they say they shouldn't do, they're doing. That they shouldn't be, you know, when they say, oh no, you know, because it's the opposite. We know it's the opposite. When they say that, oh no, we don't protect pedophiles, you know that they do. Because do they? Yeah, they do. So yeah, when they say that they don't, they do. When they say they don't do something, they're always doing it. Oh no, we would never lie. Well then we know that you lie all the time. Straight across the board. No, if they say they don't do it, oh no, we don't sneak and watch R-rated movies. You know that they do. Because we did. Also, on the website, does it say, oh, no, we don't shun? It does, doesn't it? Oh, no, we don't shun. But do we know they do? Mm-hmm. So they say they don't shun? They do shun. When they say they don't, beat with wooden spoons, they beat with wooden spoons. They're the cult of the demonized Smurf. They're the cult of the demonized Smurf. And, everything they say that they don't do. Oh, no, we'd never lie on our field service report, do they? Mm-hmm. Of everything they say they don't do, they do. So straight across the board, no matter what. We know that's true. So, it's opposite with them. And if they say like, oh, no, 1914, that makes perfect sense. Does it? No, exactly. Oh, 607, that's accurate. Well, is it? No. See? There's a pattern of like everything that they say, no matter what it is the opposite. No, we're not going bankrupt. Going bankrupt. Oh, no, we're growing by leaps and bounds. Are they? No, because we know. Are they growing by leaps and bounds? No, they're petering. Exactly. Of whatever they say, it's the opposite. And, is that a coincidence, Lloyd Evans? That, every word that comes out of their mouth is a lie. But then, it's like, but then some things you believe, like he wants to go through Charles Taze Russell, like Charles Taze Russell was some kind of truth teller. Like, oh, I didn't realize that Charles Taze Russell, when Charles Taze Russell says something in the literature that Lloyd's going to read and say, well, no, it says here that Charles Taze Russell says that to do Freemasonry is wrong and that they would never do it. Well, I didn't realize Charles Taze Russell said, that because he's a truthful guy. He's a truthful guy. That if he says he doesn't do it, then what does that mean? That means he's doing it. That he's doing it. Charles Taze Russell also said he wasn't, jerking off. Like that he didn't cheat on his wife. And that Freddie Franz is an expert in Hebrew. And that, and guess what? Uncle Tony's also not an alcoholic. Tony, they also said, oh, no, Tony wasn't an alcoholic. He wasn't a drunk. Also, Rutherford wasn't a drunk either. And he didn't, have an affair with Berta Pio. It's like, yeah, he did. Oh, and Freddie Franz wasn't gay either. And that he wasn't taking young boys up to his room for weirdo Bible studies. Well, we know that's not true. Everything that comes out of their mouth is a lie. And to quote any type of Watchtower literature and take it at its face value that they're not lying. I've never seen such insanity come out of Lloyd Evans's mouth ever in my entire life. Ever. Where it's like to fit his own agenda that he, it's like, Lloyd, you were never raised a Jehovah's Witness, at all. Prove, And I like seriously, or he's like completely off of his rocker. Because it's like, hey, Lloyd, why don't, if your dad really is a witness, why don't you ask him about the weirdo symbols all over the magazines? He'll be like, well, that's a coincidence too. Like he would agree, like you're in agreement with your own dad. Yeah. Are you? Daryl Wahlberg says it's a coincidence too. When you ask it, it's like, oh no, we don't do spirit. It's like, seriously? We would go to the Toys R Us, to get a board game. And it was like, oh, there's a Ouija board. Should we get it? Every time. every time. There wasn't a time where it's like you see it, it's like, oh, you at least want to look at it. Because you're not supposed to. So you do. And you sneak it. You know. That was what being a witness back then was all about. Well, you know, I read this. I shouldn't have. I read this book on spiritism. And, you know. I read a Stephen King book. You know, and then they get all paranoid and freaked out. They're so freaked out about demon, you know. God. Yeah. Like, it's a very easy tell. Of like, you were never raised a witness then. You just got zero clue. Next. You know, next, Lloyd. You know, next. You know, it's the cult of the demonized Smurf. You know, they're obsessed with it. They're obsessed with anything weirdo. You know, because, you know, I'm the urban legend. And so whatever I was obsessed with, they're obsessed with too. You know, so it's like, you know, another beards and pants and all Smurf girl, you know, and then it's like, you know, they're all Ouija board, tarot card, Freemasonry, demonized Smurf cult. And anything that comes out of their mouth is going to be a lie and the opposite, no matter what. So I just want to say that because, you know, seriously, like, you're full of shit and you're harmful because you don't know what you're talking about and you need to be, you know, just silence. Just shut up. You don't know what you're talking about at all. You know, I think your experience in the witnesses is so minimal, you know, minimal at best. You're a fake, you're a charlatan, and then anybody else that is like, you know, I said, I'm done. You know, that's all I wanted to say. You know, anyone who really was raised one knows it's like, oh yeah, I used to sneak it too. You know, like we used to talk about that. If you know, that you know, no matter what, if you went into a bookstore, you at least glance, you know, like, you know, who's this? The occult is a females witness females porn. You know, of what they're into. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say.